introduction about the product folks, and then we'll get into the event right away. So I'm Alan. I am joined with Akash, my co-organizer and the host for the day. Thank you so much, Akash, for your time. We are also joined with Murali, the Chief Product Officer, the co-founder of Wingman. And a bit about Product Folks. Product Folks is a product-driven, volunteer-driven community, and we are a bunch of product enthusiasts. We are a bunch of product early stage PMs in the group, and our goal is simple. We just want to have a community of product managers who can think alike, and India needs more product managers, so that's the goal. And the topic for today's event is how to play in competitive markets. And when we thought about that topic, Wingman was the first company to come in our mind, and we are lucky to have Murali for this session. Thank you so much, Murali. Thank you for your time. Akash, over to you. Akash, you're on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you were the host, so I couldn't really speak. So thank you so much, Alan. Great. So even before we go into the actual topic, I think we have a small event for everybody here, a small activity, so that it's not heavy right from the start, right? And perhaps let me just tell you what the structure of today's call is going to be. We'll start off with the small activity. We'll go into a little about Murali, right? Who is Murali? What is Wingman? A little about his background. So we'll take about 10 minutes over there, and then we are going to go into the heavy topic of that is today's agenda, right? Which is how exactly does Wingman manage to play in this highly competitive market? What are the strategies that Wingman follows? And all of that. So that's the entire idea. So we'll have a 5-minute activity followed by a 10-minute introduction session, and then we'll have about 45 minutes for the actual topic of the day, and then we'll open it up for the audience, right? Perhaps maybe we'll have a small Q&A, a couple of minutes or 5 minutes in between, just to know your thoughts, your feedback, or anything like that, right? So let's open it up with a very, very small activity. So here it goes, right? Let me share my screen with you guys. So can you see my screen, everybody? Okay, so when you see this picture, can you tell me what's the first thing that comes to your mind? All right, I think I'm getting a few answers here. It's, you and I in this beautiful world. So exactly, so that's the idea. It is Hutch, and right now, then it was basically Vodafone that bought a major stake in Hutch, and then it has become Vodafone Idea. And there's a reason it became Vodafone Idea, right? And what is that particular reason? It's Jio.
Yeah.
So Jio was founded in 2016. Vodafone has been there for ages. Airtel has been there for ages. Idea has been there for ages. But there was this one player who came in between, maybe changed the entire landscape. And we see that internet is in a lot of households today because of Jio, right? So this is about one such example, right? Can you tell me? And this is something that's maybe relevant for today's times, right? I'm sure we know both the products here. Can people type in the second product? Of course, I think Chaitanya has mentioned the answer itself directly. So we have yeah, awesome. So the second product is actually Skype. Cisco and Skype have been there for ages, but we really wanted a new player. And yeah, so we have Zoom here that has completely changed the game. And like Akhil said, we have a lot more products as well, right? It's not just Zoom. A lot of other products are also able to survive in this market. We have Google Meet, we have Amazon Chime, but nothing beats Zoom, right? They've completely changed the game. Now let's come to the same thing, maybe a little tougher. Can you tell me what this is? What is MySpace? Exactly. And for people who didn't get it yet, you know what this is? Yeah, I think a lot of people know the answer. Yeah, it is Friendster. I know it's Friendster, Shruti, because you can see Friendster there. But yeah, for people who still didn't get that, yeah, I'm sure you must have used this, right? And all right. But yeah, nothing beats Facebook, right? So you had predecessors, you had MySpace, you had Friendster, and Orkut was always there, of course. But then this one player which has beaten them all, and of course, it's not just that one player that exists in the market. You have multiple players who are existing in the market, right? You have Snapchat, you have Twitter, but it's a highly competitive market. But a few big players somehow tend to survive, and some just die down. Okay, what about this? How many of you have heard about this product? All right. Great. I have an answer from Abhinandan. So very few answers for this one. Great. Alan says Rahul Vora. He's straight into the CEO itself. So fantastic. So yeah, Superhuman wants to make your email experience better, right? Millions of users around the world. It's a free product, and in comes Superhuman, something that is charging you $30 per user per month to provide you fantastic email experience, right? And you want to guess how well they're doing? They have about 15,000 customers already, and about 250,000 people who are waiting just to actually use Superhuman, and Rahul Vora is not letting them in, right? So that's the actual degree to which Superhuman has actually performed, right? So why am I telling all of this? It's just because I wanted to set the agenda for today. It's because Murali or Wingman has been operating in a highly competitive space, and we wanted to know from Murali as to how exactly do you go about playing in such a space, right? So what I'll do right now is that I'll stop sharing my screen. We'll get into the agenda of today's meeting. So, Murali, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Akash. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So, I'm a sales engineer. I work very closely with the sales team, so I know what Wingman is. But for the audience, right? Can you tell us what Wingman is all about, and also a little about yourself?
Yeah, Wingman is a product for sales folks that listens to their calls and tells them what to say or what not to say to help close the deal. So you could be in a conversation with a prospect, and a mistake often that young sales reps make is they talk a lot, and then Wingman will prompt you to perhaps stop talking and ask a question. Or if the customer, if the prospect wants to know how you're different from a particular competitor, Wingman can show you a card with that information, so you have it handy and you're not stumped. That's what Wingman does. Um, I'm one of the co-founders, and I lead product at Wingman. So that's what I do.
That's amazing. And for all engineers, because I know that for people, for product managers perhaps, or perhaps for the GTM folks, it's easy to understand what sales as a process is. But for others, just to give you a brief idea, perhaps it's all about either going out, calling those customers, generating interest, or perhaps customers who already have interest reaching out to you. And after that, once you're on call, what Wingman does is help them out, right? Just like Murli mentioned, be it with objection handling, understanding competitors, or or explaining it to the customer as to why your product is better than the competitor. So thank you so much for that, Murli. So that's fantastic. I think everybody now knows what Wingman is about. But now, can we know a little more about you, right? Can you tell us a little more about yourself, where you did your schooling, your college perhaps, and yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up. My dad worked for a bank, so I grew up in a bunch of places. But I most identify with Hyderabad because that's where I spent the most of my childhood, or a big chunk of it at least. And then, yeah, I did. I studied. I did schooling there from fifth to 12th. I studied computer science at IIT Madras. Basically doing my undergrad. Um, and then, that's my background. Uh, and
Right.
then yeah,
Yeah.
and then yeah, I started working at a bunch of places, and I'm sure we'll get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that was
Yeah,
exactly the next thing I wanted to ask you, because what happens is all of us really want to be an entrepreneur, or not a lot of us want to be an entrepreneur. All of us want those safe jobs as such. But I'm sure there must be something that must have triggered that entrepreneurship drive in you, right? I just wanted to know more from you, if throughout this entire experience was there something, or were there a few incidents that actually triggered this off, that I want to be an entrepreneur attitude?
definitely wasn't there until sometime in my career. Like, my background's fairly risk averse. Like, my dad works for a bank. He's the riskiest thing he's done is bought Reliance stock, I would guess.
All right.
Uh, but I mean, in so from there isn't any. But basically, when I was studying too in college, basically the where I was going towards was to do a PhD. So I was going to do a PhD at, like, if everything was kind of set, I was going to go to Penn State and do a PhD in computer architecture. That's where I was going. But then I was doing some research and we published some papers, and I realized this is not all that it's meant. It's not all that it's made up to be. At least didn't suit my interest, is what I felt. And Pennsylvania, if anyone's been there, it's like a freaking cold place. Uh, Spending 5 years there doing this wasn't like all that appealing at that point. And then I did an internship at Intel, and I was like, okay, this is not bad. They paid me a grand salary. They paid me 10,000 rupees a month. I was like, wow, I can go eat whatever I want. So it's like, okay, I'm not doing a PhD. So I went and, I started working. So I worked at a company called Trilogy for the first year out of college. That's where I got placed on campus. It was a fantastic place. I met a lot of my closest friends there, but work at Trilogy wasn't all that interesting, I felt. So after about a year there, I was looking for uh, you know at that point my goal was to find technically interesting work, right?
Right.
Interesting at that time to me was all, is it technically challenging? That
All
is the
right.
only thing I was looking at. And then I went to like.com, which is a startup. And actually, at that time, like.com was called ria.com.
Right.
Um, they were an internet darling at that time. This was 2006. So
Right.
they launched sometime in 2005 as an app that basically you can share a photo album, pick out your face, tag yourself on a few of those pictures, and it will find you on all the others.
All right.
The stuff that Google Photos and
Yeah.
the iPhone does today. Um, and that seemed really cool. I joined them, just because I thought I'll get to do cool stuff there.
Okay.
Um, and it was a soon after I joined, they had to basically uh, completely shut down that product, because while that had like an insane, tremendous early interest, they
Right.
could not, like, they had horrible churn. All users were stopped using the product very quickly. I mean, no one called it churn at that time, but
All right.
basically users, basically after early interest, we could not sustain user interest, and they pivoted into like.com,
All
which was
right.
far more successful. Um, like.com At like.com, we built visual search for shopping,
Right.
which is, if you find a shoe, you can find other shoes that look like it.
Pretty cool.
Um, so I was there for about 4 years at like.com before we got acquired by Google. And somewhere maybe 3 years in is when I realized I wanted to start a company. So
Right.
not realized. That's when I kind of actually started developing interest in starting up of my own. By the time we got acquired, I was certainly sure that this is what I want to do
Right.
this at some point. But it took many more years after that to actually get started,
All right.
because of several circumstances. But I like it was incredible learning at that time, because it's a it was we grew. So I joined when we were maybe 20 people.
Right.
When we exited to Google, we were maybe 50 people. But during those 4 years, I learned, in any given year, I learned a lot more than I did in my 5 years at Google, I would say.
All right. That's actually very interesting, because I think the dream for everybody is to get into Google, right? Google does cool tech, so everybody wants to get into Google, and here you are. You say that okay, what you learned in like.com is much more than what you learned in Google.
Actually, Google was my dream job in 2006. I interviewed with them. I didn't get it.
Right. Okay.
I don't know what my career would have been like if I got through that interview at that time. But at that time it was like, yeah, I wanted, Google builds the best distributed systems. But by the time I actually started working at Google, it was never. I mean, there are different people who thrive in different environments. For me, by the time in 2010, Google is just a very large company that was not that interesting to me. You can do. There are fantastic folks there. There are very interesting people, but the pace of doing stuff is too slow for my liking.
All right. I totally understand. And this is great. So you essentially quit Google to come up with the idea of Wingman, right? But if you really look at it, your history, you're a software engineer, right? And it so happens that generally when people come up with ideas, it's regarding things they've done before, or something that's happened to them before. So that's the idea. But you're a software engineer building a sales product. I'm really interested to know how this happened, right? Is it because you met your team? Just wanted to know that part of it. How was the ideation of Wingman?
And that's an interesting question. So what happened is basically, I quit Google with the idea that I'm going to move to India and start up. That's all I had. So before that, I basically quit Google. We sold everything we had. Me and my wife, we went for a year. We were just traveling the world because it's something we always wanted to do before moving back. So at that time, not thinking about knowing that basically the plan was to move to India and start up, but it was like, okay, we have a budget. We're going to travel until we finish this up. So we're going to travel for as long as possible until we run out of money. And that was the plan. And then we did that. And then I came to India without an idea, without a team, and then initially I gave myself like a deadline of 6 months. I will get an idea, I will get a team, I'll start a company, right? That was how I started. I basically started talking to friends. I started talking to friends, people in my network, to see who's first of all in that same mind frame of starting up, right? And then what ideas can we explore that is mutually interesting. So I hit up pretty much everyone in my network, and I started talking to all my friends. So my other co-founder Shrikar. There are two other co-founders, Shrikar and Shruti. So Shrikar is actually a very close friend of mine. So we started our first jobs together in 2005 at Trilogy. And he was also in the Bay Area. We used to do a lot of stuff together. We used to hike, we used to play football, we used to go snowboarding, we used to do a lot of stuff. And then basically he was in the mind frame of maybe a few years from then he might want to move to India. He was at that time he was at Uber doing machine learning. He spent his career doing machine learning. So then he and I started exploring some ideas while he was still in the US, I was in India. And we basically spent almost 6-8 months on one idea until we could invalidate it really. And then also I was talking to other people. So there's another friend of mine who was my classmate in college, and Shruti. He was Shruti's classmate in B school. So he introduced Shruti and me, and actually both he and Shruti were also in the mind frame of thinking about starting up, etc. And so what we would do is in the weekends we would meet up in coffee shops in Bangalore. So we've been to so many coffee days and stuff. So almost Shruti was then working. So she was actually just about maybe for a year and a half almost. We were meeting up on weekends and just talking about ideas, brainstorming them, trying to validate them, trying to do many things. She was at Payoneer at that time. Payoneer, for those who don't know, is a fintech company that helps with cross-border payments. They're a pretty large company now, and she was one of their. She was pretty much heading up their. She was heading up many parts of the India office. So they started the India office new, and part of her responsibility was setting up the go-to-market team. So she ended up hiring salespeople. She ended up learning to, what is sales? How do I hire for sales? How do I train salespeople? So that was all part of what she had to learn and do at that time, which is when she was introduced to sales, and she was doing that for like a year, um, where she basically felt where she felt like nobody understands what's going on. Salespeople have a lot of conversations. They tell me, if something goes well, then they close a deal. If something doesn't go well, then I know very little about why. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know how to tweak. Is that pricing wrong? Is our customers going to a competitor? Or like why are they not signing up? I get very little information. And people are not very good at updating their CRMs, especially if a deal doesn't close. And she also found it very difficult to coach them on actual call skills, because she can be on very few calls with them while they're actually doing this. And so that was the genesis of the idea for Wingman. At that time, we were called Strings.ai. So when we first started, it was basically a prototype app for her to use and for her team to use. So that's how we built it first while she was at Payoneer.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I was actually going to ask you about the Strings.ai to Wingman transition. But yeah, thanks for actually bringing it up, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we pretty much now understand the ideation of Wingman, how you met the team, maybe Shruti being the point of contact who brought the sales angle, right? And Shrikar is the CTO right now. You're the Chief Product Officer, and Shruti is the CEO of the company. Fantastic. Now, maybe we'll jump right into the topic, right? So, well, it's not an easy market to play. Let's just accept that, right? Because you are maybe entering into a market that already has a lot of bigger players. You have Kong, you have Chorus, but I really wanted to know, when you went about deciding that this is the market that you had to play. You said that you had these weekend meetups. How did you decide that, hey, there are bigger players in the market already, but we still can go about getting a chunk of the pie, or maybe beating the competition altogether?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So when we actually started, the way we went about it was, initially we were like, okay, Shruti has this problem. Do other people have this problem? So we went about trying to talk to other Indian companies in our network. So we were reaching out to whoever was in our network. So we reached out to a lot of Indian companies who are selling in India, because they were easiest for us to reach. And we asked them, and we tried to pitch the product to them, figure out what they'll do, will they pay, etc. And what we found quickly was, in a lot of Indian companies selling to the Indian market, the sales folks are not paid all that much. And so they were very reluctant to spend money on tooling for them. So they were, the way they solve problems is just by adding more people. That's how a lot of them viewed sales. And very script based. They were just doing the same thing over and over. And so we quickly realized that this isn't going to work. So our product actually cannot play in this market. And then we reached out to, and then we thought, okay, what about the US market? They pay salespeople a lot more. And then we reached out to a few people who were, sales leaders in the US. So there was a network called GLG that our friend had access to, where you can basically say who you want to talk to, and you pay for it. Of course, you pay for their time. You give profiles, and they tell you, okay, these are some people of these profiles. They charge this much per hour to talk to them. And so we spoke to a few people from medium to large size companies in the US who were sales leaders. And they really resonated with the problem. So we spoke to about 4 or 5 people. They resonated with the problem. So we were kind of telling them, okay, what if we could analyze the calls that are happening and tell you if this person is, why somebody is doing better than the other, etc. Of course, we didn't start with that. We started with trying to understand, what they do. Do they face the underlying issue? Things like that. Knowing what I know now, we would have done those interviews much better. But at that point, we did the best we could. And then we realized, okay, these people feel the problem. Paying us what we need to build this product is not an issue for them. So there is something there. And then we just jumped into it and started building. And we started building a prototype, and then at maybe a month or two in is when we really realized that there are a couple of players already, that this is not an original idea. Like until then we were like, oh man, we have this cool new original idea, and and then we realized there are a couple of players who are like already reasonably well funded. At that time they were in their series A, and growing quickly, and the two were Chorus and Gong, and they were basically selling to the inside sales space, and primarily SaaS companies, and there was very good reason for that, because they are early adopters of this tech. They are early adopters of tech in general. They are a lot of people have a reluctance of both recording their sales calls in other industries, etc. These people just went headlong into it. If they could see a benefit, they would adopt it without too much hesitation. And they were quickly growing in that market. And so by the time, within the next year, they had grown rapidly. Between when we started and within the next year, they'd grown a lot, and they created a lot of buzz, a lot of marketing, and the entire ecosystem became very aware of them and the space, etc. So that's kind of how, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but that's kind of how
you
it played
did. Actually, I had a couple of good takeaways there. I guess what you did was good research in the beginning to understand what market you want to play in. So what you understood is maybe India is not really the right market for you, because the sales reps are not getting paid so much at all. The company is not really interested to spend so much on sales reps. They would definitely not invest to spend on software that helps sales reps. So that's the reason you actually focus on US as a market. And that's one very important point. And for listeners here, I just wanted to maybe share one aspect. I guess when Murali mentioned inside sales, he was speaking about sales that happens mostly based on calls or video conferencing as such, as opposed to field sales. You're not really meeting the customer, so most of these calls are actually recorded. So you wanted to make use of these recordings, if I'm not wrong. And Wingman's original idea was to actually transcribe and annotate calls, is it? Only just wanted to understand that aspect.
Yeah. So originally, when we built Strings.ai, the original idea was, we basically either if they're making calls through dialer systems, which is how they made phone calls, we would download the recordings, transcribe them, analyze them. Or if they were doing video conference meetings like this, we would join the meeting and record it.
Right.
And then the initial product was basically trying to understand all those conversations and give insights to managers to say, trying to tell them what is going well and what is not going well. And it also allowed managers to coach their reps. So they could go in there and listen to a particular call, listen to it much quicker than if they had to listen to the whole recording, because the transcript was there. They could jump to the parts that were actually interesting to them, and then leave comments for the reps to say, hey, you did great on this section, or you could have done this thing slightly differently. So that's what the product did. And that's what it did for almost the first year of our existence. 6 months to 9 months of our existence. That's what it did. Yeah.
Perfect. I totally get it. And I think one more part that was very interesting to me was the fact that, one good part about entering a space that already has players in it is that the players have already ensured that they've, educated the industry, right? What are the benefits? What are not the benefits? So your marketing spends would be much lesser because you don't have to spend on educating the industry anymore. You can focus more on the product itself. Right.
Yeah, for sure. So that was definitely a thing. When we first had our initial conversations, we still had to educate customers earlier. But about a year in, like, customers were already educated because there were a couple of companies spending a lot of money on marketing. If you went to San Francisco, they had banners and BART stations and stuff. So they were, because they'd raised a lot of money, got a lot of attention, growing very fast. So the early adopter market started getting very aware of this category of products and understanding that there is a need for it. So that did definitely help that they were there and doing that. So we did not need to spend as much money educating them.
Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. And I'm just curious, what is the timeline? I know we've spoken a lot about, how you did the ideation, how you quit your job, how you went about making one prototype for Shruti's team alone, and then we made a complete prototype for, sorry, a complete product for the market itself, right? Just want to understand the timeline as to what are the years we're speaking here.
I quit Google in 2015. 2016, I moved to India. Around early 2018 is when we first started talking about this idea. And then maybe March, April is when we made a prototype for Shruti and her team. In May, and then we started having conversations in India. May is when May 2018 is when we officially started the company. And we also started, we started researching the US market and, hearing more about customers there. We built an MVP between May and I would say August is when we built we built an MVP that I think September is when we got our first paying customer.
Right.
September or October is when we got our first paying customer. So there was something to sell. So we wanted to build an MVP quickly so that we could, we could start selling it, because there's no real validation until people are willing to pay you money.
Yeah.
So we got a few early customers then, and then that was most of 2018 was spent doing that.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And let me tell you why I asked you this question, right? There's this very famous quote by Reid Hoffman. He says that if you're not really embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you've launched too late. But in your case, because there were already existing players in the market, I was wondering if it actually makes sense to hold off, build the product with a lot more features, and then launch.
I mean, we were definitely very embarrassed by our early product, but so what helped us out was our initial customers were Indian SaaS companies were selling in the US, who maybe who maybe our competitors had not reached yet. Mm-hmm. So they were mainly selling in the US. What we found is there is a small segment. It's a very small. You can't build a market around this, but there are companies in India selling in the US market who value. They have inside sales teams who value them a lot. For whom coaching them is very important. Companies such as Freshworks, a great example. And so we started talking to them, reaching out to them through our network. So one of our earliest customers was ChargeBee. They started using us towards the end of 2018. And so selling to them helped us because one, the competition had not yet, while they were starting to become aware that such a category exists, they hadn't really, done demos with our competition. They hadn't, deeply penetrated yet. And so that helped us start with a product that is not fully feature compatible with, not have everything that Gong or Chorus had, but had a little bit. We could charge a lot less than they did, of course, for the functionality we provided, and able to build the product that way with their feedback.
Right, makes a lot of sense. And the charging part of it, do you think we have an Indian advantage perhaps? Because when you hire engineers in the West, or even the sales reps, perhaps you have to pay a lot more. I think this is the playbook that a lot of SaaS companies also follow here, right? Be it Zoho, be it Freshworks. So I wanted to know your take on this.
So I think. So definitely we have an advantage in India in that, the development costs, the cost of selling all helps. But one thing that is slightly different for us than from Freshworks and Zoho is that Freshworks and Zoho, where they sold a lot of the initial customers were SMBs. In our case, what happens is SMBs don't actually find our product very useful because they have one or two salespeople and, they don't even know what they want to do with them. They don't have a plan to coach them. And so we found slightly larger companies of 10 plus sales reps is who it really mattered to. And they are not that price conscious in the US, in that market. So they, because we sell it at 30% cheaper or, even cheaper, they're not necessarily going to, come to us. so that's something we found. It was interesting because initially we did have those. It took us some time to learn this.
Right. So, Murali, I think we kind of lost you there.
Okay. Can the rest of you hear me?
Murali, I can hear you. Akash?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I think that was a Zoom problems, work from home problems. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, sorry for that.
Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no worries. So that's what. So what I was saying with respect to pricing is that we found that our ideal target audience was not that price sensitive. So they were not going to pick us simply because we were cheaper. Um, uh, because this was not a it may help a little bit in the decision making, but we really had to have something that really convinced them to switch to us. So which is what brings us to, when we realized this is when we started looking for a true differentiator in this space, because we realized that, we cannot do exactly what they do. So until that point, what we did was very similar to what Gong and Chorus were doing. We were selling them. It was hard to sell in the US. So we would go into conversation after conversation and they would, we not able to sell. That's when we realized we needed a true differentiator, something that was exciting, attractive enough in this space to actually play, because otherwise you would not be able to sell. Around that point, Shrikar was like just doing, over Christmas or something, he hacked something up together to build real-time transcription for Zoom calls. So he did this, and we were like able to. Earlier, we were working with recordings that came up after the call. So he built this, and then we were like, okay, what can we build out of this? This is interesting. Can we build something that is a differentiator from here? And then we for example, we were speaking to ChargeBee, and one of their problems is that they have they have a product that integrates with a lot of payment gateways in different geographies. They may be dealing with different gateways and things like that, and it was hard for sales reps to have all of these things at their fingertips. Which is when the idea came up, if we can figure out what is the context of the conversation and match that to content that somebody has built on our platform, we can, for example, show up information that the reps need in real time. And this we thought was perhaps, something interesting that, that somebody might find as a true differentiator. So that's how we, that was the idea of Wingman. So at that point, we built a desktop app to surface this content. We called the desktop app Wingman, and later renamed the company to Wingman. So we just have, one message. But because it resonated with the audience, if somebody hears we're a product for salespeople, and they hear that the product is called Wingman, they kind of get what we do. So that was the idea, and that having that as a differentiator has helped us attract customers, because it's something new and something interesting. Akash, I think you're muted if you're speaking.
Just 1 second. Let me see.
Oh.
Yeah. Akash, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. Sorry for that to everybody. That's actually interesting, and I think we have a lot of questions along those lines as well. So maybe just to one of the questions was, of course, can you explain the phases? We'll come to that in the Q&A session, maybe, but just to, summarize what you said, the first thing that you did really well was, research the market well. You understood which market you really wanted to go to. So that part was, you spoke to a lot of people, understanding if this is a product that is worth building, first of all. Then you basically went ahead and entered the market and made use of the point that people, the competitors had educated the market already. And essentially the third part you did was, you didn't really just want to play on the pricing different standpoint. What you wanted to create was a true differentiator in the product itself. So you added this extra concept where you went about doing real-time transcription that helps sales reps maybe do very good objection handling, right? Give them cues when the call is actually on, so that they don't really get embarrassed when customers ask them questions and they don't really know the answer to their own products as such. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Of course, you can elaborate more once we come to the Q&A session. And I think there are a few questions around how you chose the market, but there's one question about your funding as such. And this is something that I wanted to ask you as well. So basically, you make a choice whether you want to remain bootstrapped or do you want to go for VC funding. So in your case, just wanted to understand, you were part of Y Combinator's S19 batch. You're also backed by Special Invest. Why did you choose VC here?
So, I mean, we definitely, in a market that is crowded, we definitely, it was very clear to us that we needed to raise VC money because we have competitors spending a lot of money in marketing. I think they raised a lot of money. They're growing very quickly. Basically, it was important that we have we have significant runway of our own. And bootstrapping would have made life harder for us, for sure, because we needed to do a lot of experimentation quickly, and have some capital to try and attack the market. So VC is an obvious choice. Our biggest investors actually, Venture Highway. I think they led our seed round soon after YC. They've invested in Misho, in OK Credit. Special, you mentioned, is also an investor, and we have several angels. Yeah.
That's awesome. And maybe not a perfect segue as such, but this is something I kind of just remembered. So I was listening to a podcast the other day where so Peter Thiel was essentially part of PayPal, and there were a lot of competitors there, and they were basically just a plugin before, right? They were part of eBay. They facilitated payments on eBay, and eBay was huge then. And there were so many other clones that came into the market too at that point. And Peter Thiel says this one particular statement where he goes, "It's not just enough to the goal. I mean, the goal is not just to beat the competition. It's to break free of competition altogether." So from your standpoint, are there any strategies that you have, at least in the near future, to do this, or do you even agree with Peter Thiel's statement?
I think in today's world, it's honestly, it's difficult. It's so easy to start companies. It's so easy to build software. Um, Everybody has to realistically deal with a lot of competition. It's a fact of life. There are, every time you do something, like just this week, for example, Outreach announced a product called Kaya, which is very similar to what we do at Wingman. So it does real-time transcription. It shows content to sales reps in real time. So competition is going to be a fact of life, and everyone. And if you don't pay attention to competition, often today, they will somebody will overtake you.
Right.
And we are entering into a space that already has competitors too, and we go into deals and compete with the bigger players in the market. So usually you do have. I mean, very few companies have that luxury today of of really not paying that much attention to competition. Because it's so easy to start companies and build software, I feel.
Yeah, and coming to easy to build part of it. So how tech heavy is Wingman actually? Because I think right from your like.com days, a lot of ML was there on that product. Is it the same with Wingman too? Is it extremely tech heavy? Um,
So Wingman's definitely, there is a fair bit of tech going into Wingman. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say an 8. I mean, where 10 on 10 would be like a self-driving car company, right?
right.
So we're not that, but we're also not we're not also building like Trello or something, which would be which would interesting on. There are still technical challenges there, but we have more to do. So we have more NLP at the core of the product. We have to understand what is being spoken. The tech to actually join record meetings is non-trivial because you're live streaming. It took us a while to figure out. There are some interesting challenges on our product on the desktop side. Like, for example, if we have an app showing salespeople content that they can consume, if they're doing a screen share, it cannot be the prospect on the other side. If they look at it, if they're able to see it, then it defeats the purpose. So we have to figure that out. So a lot of interesting technical challenges we have to figure out on the way. And we do spend, a bulk of our team is product and engineering. So it's definitely, reasonably tech heavy.
That's great. And how do you go about, hiring that team? Do you have a philosophy when you hire?
So, I mean, one of the things that has helped us is, almost everybody on our team has, we are 9 people today. Almost everyone has started a company, started a business, has done something like that before, or they're here to, or the allure that, the pitch often is you learn how to build a company, right? Because we're build it with us as part of the early teams. That has helped us. And, basically that character in people has helped people deal with the ambiguity of an early stage startup, because nothing is clear. It seemed like, when you summarize a revolution, it seems like a very straight line. But in reality, in every aspect of that, there was a lot of chaos and a lot of lack of clarity.
Right.
Only after months do you get clarity about any specific thing. There are always questions, there are always doubts. So I think at least our team so far, we've been able to hire people who are comfortable with that and have embraced that and helped us. Everyone understands it and works together to solve those problems and develop more understanding and clarity. So that has really helped us, with the team so far.
That's really great. And maybe one last question before we open up to the audience, and maybe it's a segue, a part of the last 2 questions as well, right? So because Product Folks is essentially a product management community here, and a lot of folks, of course, are already product managers, but then we have a lot of enthusiasts as well, people who are aspiring to become product managers, people who are not really from the engineering end, but want to really get into product management. So from your end, right, you're working in a tech heavy company. How important do you think the technical skill sets would be for a product manager?
So I'm a very technical person, right? Like, I'm happiest. My comfort zone is if I am writing code. Like, if I have an hour of free time, I would probably be writing some code rather than doing something else. And I still feel like an imposter as a product manager. Like, I don't, I totally have imposter syndrome because I often feel I quite don't know what I'm doing. Right? This is, I think I don't think. So it used to be the case that if you were very technical, if you're a technical product manager, that's when you could get the respect of the engineers. And I think the reason for that is because if you wanted to build something, you had to be technical before. If you had to put up a website, you had to be technical before. But that's not true today. What I think PMs do need to have the skill to build, right? They need to have, to build something, what do you need? You need to be able to design. You need to be able to talk to users, strategize, understand what is important, what is liked, what is not liked, and you need to be able to build it. But today you can do all of these things without necessarily having to code. And so you can get the respect of your team if you're still able to put some stuff together and understand things yourself. So I would say that is far less important today than it used to be 10 years ago. And the other aspects of it are far more important.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And maybe the burning topic for the time, right? How do you actually deal with maybe the entire COVID situation here? And how do you ensure that, did you change your marketing strategy or maybe the product strategy to adapt to the situation?
Definitely, in the sense everybody has had to adapt, right? Because very quickly, what was working, everything's changed for a lot of people. I think one thing we've seen for Wingman is we've benefited a little bit because our product because the coaching aspect of a product really helps when salespeople are remote. So because you need some tool to communicate with sales reps and train them and coach them. So among our existing users, we've seen a lot of increased adoption in the last few weeks as COVID came and everyone started working remotely. And so we realized, okay, that's that's something we need to play on and emphasize the fact that Wingman helps sales teams work remotely. So we've basically have been doing marketing around that. We've been writing content around it. We wrote an ebook recently around around what COVID's done to sales teams and how to stay productive in that time. And then we offered, so basically for newly remote sales teams, we are offering to help bring them on, have them give them an extended trial while they figure out what's going on, and then they can pay later. So those are kind of things we have been doing.
That's a nice thing to do. That's actually really nice. So Murali, I think we pretty much covered the agenda, and we have a lot of questions. I think we have about 19 questions waiting for you, with about half an hour or so left. So what we'll do is we'll jump straight into the questions, take the questions from the audience, and yeah, we can take it forward from there, right? So maybe I'll just read out the questions to you. Yeah. Maybe I'll just read out the first question. After this, I'll start sorting it according to the likes. So they're asking, I mean, the audience is asking you, how did you get your first seed funding? How did you, structure that? How did you go about that process?
So there is actually, so our fundraise is a bit of a story, but what happened is, the first check into the company officially was Y Combinator. That was the first check. But even before that, we actually had a term sheet from a VC in India, and we kind of so we were forming the company was like, it was an ordeal for us. So we made some mistakes because we got bad legal advice, and we messed up in forming so basically we were very clear from the beginning that our company needed to be in the US, headquartered in the US with an India subsidiary. And the reason for that is because we're playing in the US market. We needed, our customers were in the US, or at least would be. And then so we thought we might have VC interest in the US in the future, all of those things. And a lot of regulations are changing in India. People are finding it harder to flip company structures and stuff. So we wanted to headquarter it in the US. And in the process of doing that, we got some bad legal advice, and we could not. We had a term sheet. We didn't have a company to accept that money into. And then what happened was, it took us some time. It took us many months to actually get it right. And then around that time, we also interviewed with YC. We got accepted. So the first check-in was YC, and then the other, basically a few investors who had already committed to us earlier. They invested, and then the bulk of the seed round that we raised came at the end of YC. So at demo day. So that's where we raised most of the money we've raised to date. But we had a little bit of money before, around the start of YC.
That's great. That's great. And because you're speaking about the US markets as well here, right? Just wanted to understand. I mean, basically, I believe Abhinandan asked, how do you position yourself in the US competitive market, and if you can club that with the differences between the India and Bay Area ecosystem as such. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Sorry, could you repeat? I didn't quite understand the first part of the question.
Sure. So the first question was, how do you position yourself when you're playing in the US market? How is it different as such?
I mean, our product is it is positioned the same way in US and India, in the sense that the reason is the India market is really small for us. So we don't have a separate positioning in India. It's the same. And we position it as software that helps inside sales teams with real-time coaching, and also post-call coaching. So that's kind of how we pitch the product to customers. So not much difference there. In terms of what's different between the India and Bay Area ecosystems, there is a lot that is different, right? So when we were at YC, we were with 200 other companies in the batch who were all building with us. Right, a lot of them were in our stage, some were even earlier, some perhaps later, and it was incredible how many of those companies got so much done with just the founding teams, with just two people, three people. The amount of work they were getting done and the amount of stuff they were building is incredible. In India, the tendency we've seen is teams hire very quickly because, of course, it is cheaper to hire. But also, teams grow much quicker. In the US, a lot of companies stay very lean and can get a lot done. So that's something that I found is different between the two ecosystems.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think WhatsApp was a 50-member team when they got sold for about $22 billion, acquired
Yeah,
by Facebook for $22 billion also. Yeah,
yeah.
that's crazy. So yeah, and yeah, that's actually a good idea. I mean, India is operating more like a government trying to employ as many people as possible, whereas
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of get that. And maybe the next
I
question
mean,
is,
uh,
yeah, I'm sorry for
yeah.
that.
I mean, just to add to that, no, I mean, it's it's easy to say where that comes from, right? Because we can, hiring people is cheaper there. The cost of hiring
Yeah,
is a lot more, but there is a cost to hiring, though. You become much less nimble as your team grows. Now, especially pre-product market fit, you have to be very careful about hiring a lot of people.
right.
Because it becomes harder because every change impacts a lot more people, and it's difficult to get it done.
Perfect. I totally understand. And when you actually went for the funding rounds, right? VCs, they knew that you're competing with Gong and Chorus. So the question is, how did you actually sell it to the VCs that why focus on them, and you can actually put your money in a company that's coming up?
So I think one of the things that helped us was, a lot of early stage VCs are just betting on the team.
Hmm.
So for some reason, VCs thought we were a good founding team because we had diverse experience with the team. We had Shruti was coming from a sales background a little. She'd done some sales before. She understood the problem. It comes from there. Shrikar
Hmm.
has done a lot of machine learning, which is very relevant to our problem. And I had done a lot of general product building and distributed systems and building products. So it seemed like, on paper, we seemed like a good team to them. So that got us the initial interest from VCs. And then what helped us was because we had spoken to customers of our competitors and were able to say why we would be different. So basically, a lot of them were focused at the early when we were initially pitching. They were focused on, you know, uh, uh, most of what their customers were using them was for recording and playback of calls. So even though they were pitching a bunch of other things, and so we were pitching that basically we can bring some intelligence into it. There was still not such a strong pitch. So the people who believed in us at that stage were really betting on the team. And later, when we got more clarity and said we are going to we're going to coach people in real time, that's when it really made an impression with investors. Say, okay, I can see why this can be the future and why this is important.
Perfect. That differentiator element, right?
Yeah.
That's great. And then we have a question called, what is your advice when you actually choose a market? And it is basically both from a product perspective as well as from a GTM perspective. So that's the question for you.
It's really challenging. Uh, the thing is basically when your field is uh, as you basically constrain the problem space that you're willing to work on, it gets easier and easier to narrow down into a particular idea or a particular solution. If you're starting from a wide open this thing of, I like I did, of like I want to start a company, I have no idea what market, what problem to solve, it's really wide.
Right.
I think from my experience, what I would say is give yourself time. This process takes a lot longer than I could imagine at that stage. It took me 2 years. So give yourself that latitude, and this 2 years of no paycheck in my case. thankfully my wife got a job in India, so reduce our anxiety a bit. But you need to have that space and time to kind of explore a bunch of things. A lot depends on who your team is. If you have anything to add to that problem, in our case, Shruti's experience was crucial, and we thought our team was capable of solving this problem because we had the machine learning background and we had the sales background, so we could relate to it. And so we thought, okay, our team can bring something here that we can build this product better than some other teams. So that was also an important factor.
Right, that's interesting. And I guess the next question, it's kind of based on that. So the question is, if you were to build Wingman for India, right? How would you solve for English and the multilingual, the different dialects as such? And essentially, it's a question where the audience is just curious to know if NLP for Indian languages is solved or not.
That's actually also one of the reasons we stayed away from India. So we quickly ran into that issue. So we did a pilot with one customer, and it was not just English. So when they said, when they found, whenever salespeople found a common language with a customer, they would switch to it. Like if I'm Bengali and my prospect is Bengali, I'm going to switch to Bengali because it helps, it helps me relate to that person. And so we would have to build a lot more product to actually solve for all the language challenges in India to actually make it work. So it is definitely a challenge. I don't have a good answer there. NLP is, the algorithms are there. Often what happens is a data collection issue. It is tricky when you want to basically understand what's going on in the conversation. It's issues like I think like Abhinandan said on the chat, Google speech to text, they do provide transcription for various Indian languages. That's there, but it's often not accurate enough. And making sense of the transcriptions, basically what we provide as a service, and that required a lot of building.
Right, that's great. And next question is again back to your funding days and Y Combinator. People really want to know how was the experience. You mentioned that you were in a batch of about 200 people. So we really want to know if you were able to sell the product to the YC alumni or not.
Yeah, so I think YC was incredible. So YC is incredible for a bunch of reasons. So I think as an Indian company going and selling in the US, YC was a game changer for us. Because one, it builds a little bit more credibility. We are in a market where two competitors have been able to establish a brand for themselves. And we are a third company coming in and, not as well known. So being able to say that, we were a Y Combinator company did at least get us some meetings, when we were trying to do cold email outreach and stuff. And of course, selling to the YC alumni network is a very strong thing. You get, like when, as a YC company, when you reach out to other YC companies, the response rate is like 2-3x what you would if you were just reaching out cold. So it helped us get a lot of conversations. We have sold to some YC alumni. So super invaluable. And, otherwise, some of the things that we learned at YC themselves were super useful. Like it was during YC that we, at this thing, and one of the partners, Kevin Hale, was like, what is Strings Today? It sounds to me like a dev tool. Like, if I'm a salesperson, it doesn't mean anything to me. And, that's what prompted us to change the name and the branding of the company to Wingman. And it makes so much sense. And there was a lot of focus on messaging the product in a way that, having a one-liner that people can understand your company. If we were, a lot of those things that we learned at YC are super valuable even today.
That's really amazing. And what I'll do for the next questions is, I'll actually start sharing the screen here directly with you, so that you can pick the questions, right? So can you see my screen, Murali?
Yeah, I can see a screen.
Yeah, perfect. So if you can, I think we've kind of, all right, I'll just go slow on the scrolling.
Yeah. Question: How did we get YC back in tips and tricks? So the thing that we did was, I mean, the YC interview and the application and the interview process is very well documented. Lots of people are writing about it online. But I think the thing that helped us the most was getting feedback. One, when we wrote the application, we got feedback from some YC alums on the application itself to say how did this, how do they view it, and that does refine the application. And then the other aspect was during the interview, we did several mock interviews. That also really helped refine our answers. And at the end of the day, it's a 10-minute interview, which you have to prepare for. And if you're well prepared and your product and your company is at a stage where you actually figure out what's going on, where if there's enough clarity in your business, then you have a good chance. I work with a bigger company, want to work with startups, but can't convince my parents. So, I mean, I quit when I quit Google, my parents were okay. So they were like, okay, at least they were happy that I was coming back to India. But, my in-laws were like, really, you're leaving like that big paycheck and you are, and you don't know what you'll do. So there is no, you got to do what you have to do. That's what I would say. So if what is important at some stage, once you get enough experience, it's not about, often our parents are not in the best place to guide us anymore. So we have to kind of take our own initiative in this case and, just go for what we need to. What advice? Okay. What is the biggest challenge as a SaaS founder? India's Bay Area ecosystem differences. So I think SaaS selling from India is both good and awful. It's awful because you do have to overcome some perception that companies selling in the US, people do have a perception that if you're an Indian company, they're used to Indian outsourcing companies sell them poor quality services over so many years. Everyone has an experience of being sold to by somebody who did not deliver. So you do have to overcome that challenge, and you do have to overcome that perception. So getting that trust is hard, and you have to work really hard. And there's of course a timing challenge. I'm building the product during the day, talking to customers at night. You do end up having to work very hard. So those are, as a SaaS founder, you're short on sleep. You're up all night trying to talk to customers or do customer support. Like I'm still primarily I do most customer support in our company, and it keeps you up at night. So it's a pretty big challenge. In terms of, I think India's Bay Area ecosystem, I already covered this a bit already. Don't want to repeat it. What are the challenges you faced in getting the first client in the US market? Same thing that I said earlier. Getting trust was difficult, and it took us some time. Somebody took a bet on us, honestly. That's how we got the first US client. They were just willing to bet on us because what we spoke about kind of related to them. So the differentiator that we spoke about when we said, okay, we're building something that you can help coach your reps in real time, it kind of resonated with them, and that's how they signed up for us.
Right.
Did your MVP have a key differentiator with respect to competition? How did it? Honestly, it did not. I think what was when we built the MVP, it was not that different from the competition. If anything, I would say they had more features at that time. I think what helped us was we were able to reach a small set of companies, which was Indian SaaS companies, who our competition had not reached. This is basically, that's how we were able to talk to some customers that way. And I don't think that MVP had any strong differentiators. Are enterprises ready to pay for SaaS in India or do not value software? It's changing for sure, but it's still very nascent stages. It's still challenging to sell SaaS in India for sure. you do not, people don't pay you as much. The US market will pay a lot more. A lot of companies are like, I will build this myself. Why would I pay, $10,000 for the software when I can assign one developer? But they don't understand all of the trade-offs there. So it does, have an issue. How helpful was YC's Bookface community with the launch? You have to give. I mean, the Bookface community, for those who don't have context, is there is an internal uh, there's an internal forum in YC that all the founders can post on, and a lot of people read. It is of course valuable. So we launched there. We got some interest in the product, etc. Uh, I won't say, it's not like we got 30% of our customers came from there or something like that. For some other companies, it has been the case that they've got a lot of their customers through that alone. It's definitely useful.
Yeah, Murali, I think we missed the first question itself. I'm sorry for that. I scrolled down.
How did you go about the valuation for the company? Was it a multiplication of revenue or something else? Seed funding is, the numbers are just pulled out of thin air. There is no good. If it is a multiple of revenue, then we had very little revenue. So that would have, it doesn't make any sense. I think one framework to go about it is to say, this is how much money I need, and to provide some justification for it. And at this stage, I'm willing to sell at most, 20% of the company or whatever. Right? So given the combination of those two, this is the valuation I need. It's something people can try. There's some logic to get around the valuation for a company. Ultimately, it is demand supply. So in our cases, we had a few different funds interested in investing, so that created a bit of a competitive effect to help us drive the valuation a little bit higher than otherwise. The pressure of demo day helped a lot in that because there was a small time frame in which the investment needed to get done. So it helped generate some competitive interest and drive the valuation. But there is no structure to it. It is whatever people are willing to pay. Honestly, that's how valuation is done at the seed stage. At more mature stages, a lot more things come into play. How do you break the soft cushion leaving a company like Google and shifting into a startup? This is an interesting question, right? So at Google, of course, I was well paid. We were living a very comfortable life. But the transition to, being frugal happened because because me and my wife, we sold everything. We had 2 backpacks and we were traveling, and we were traveling as cheap as possible because we wanted to travel for as long as possible. So we went into an extremely frugal mindset. And we're not spending a lot of money on normal on stuff. We weren't buying anything. You can't buy anything because anything you buy you have to carry on your back. So you can't buy anything. You can't, you're not eating out that much. You're cooking in the hostels. You're staying in hostels, backpacker hostels. So that way, by the time when we came to India, we were like, we didn't need to spend money. We were comfortable living a frugal life. So that helped a lot. So that was not a problem at that point. But the other thing, of course, is things like security and stuff. I think a lot of people worry about this unduly, I feel, because at a startup you learn so much that if the startup goes under, you get fired, whatever. Now you've learned a lot more that helps you many times get further ahead in your career rather than than if you'd been at a big company the whole time. So that's something I learned at like.com also. It's like I would have, basically at any point, if I quit like.com and tried to go to a big company, the jobs were there. They were available. My experience was valuable. And I learned a lot more. So just because the pace of learning, at a startup can accelerate your career than staying at a big company, I feel.
That's great.
How well does your under the hood tech, speech to text, NLP, etc. work as of now? This is, This is basically the key to the product, right? So it's only going to, product's only valuable if the tech under the hood works. For speech to text, of course, we use different vendors to actually do it. And then what we work on is basically providing hints to their speech to text models for how to, what is relevant vocabulary for this particular company or customer. The NLP is important in basically, getting enough context to what is going on. But one of the key aspects to product design in this space is understanding the limitation of these things. So product design has to account for this. Cannot blindly build features that, where the tech is 70% under the hood, but you show it as something that the customer needs confidence on. So you don't, there is some nuance to how you surface the results from your models which are inaccurate in a way that customer expectations are what they are. So that is somewhat key, I think, in most applications of NLP today. Is the initial MVP and current MVP are the same? No. So the product has evolved a lot. Like I said, initially we were mostly called analytics. Today we are a lot of the focus is on real-time coaching. So a lot has changed. The product looks very different. It does a lot of different things. So it's definitely not the same. How to work on data and market predictions. So this is a tough one. I don't have a good answer even today, because it's really hard. A lot of, even when you speak to 4 or 5 customers in a particular market around a particular problem, you will get wildly different answers. That is tough to make sense of and structure and understand exactly what is the need in a market. So it is a combination of, it's hard to be very data driven here. Often you need a mix of some conversations with customers in the space. You need to be able to do some back of the envelope calculations. You do need to understand the size of the market, how many, if you say, in our case, we are selling to our primary audience is inside sales teams. So how many inside sales reps are there in the US? Try to find that out. How much can you charge for them? See, first of all, at a bigger scale, is there a big enough market for building a product here? And then whether the market needs your product is much more nuanced and kind of difficult to answer. It takes time. There's no shortcut to doing it quickly. You just have to have a lot of conversations over time. How does sales of a SaaS product in international market work being in India? So thankfully, folks like Freshworks and Zoho and multiple companies have done this before and kind of have created playbooks for us to do this. And the way it works is through an inside sales model. Of course, you have you basically generate interest for your product through marketing. And you have leads come into your product, either that or sometimes you go outbound. So you email people and create leads. You email them, reach out to them on LinkedIn or in any of the different ways people do cold outreach. Find a set of people who are interested and then get them and talk to them either over the phone or through video conference, demo the software to them. And then they start a trial and then they buy. So this, thankfully, there is now a playbook for how to do this. Still, there is a lot of nuance. Every company needs to figure out their own version of that playbook. But I think it's possible today. One of the challenges, of course, is time zone. So you need to be selling at night. There is nothing. There's no workaround to it. So you have to be prepared to do that, and you have to hire a team later on who will also be prepared to do that. How long did it take you to get to a stage before you could pay yourself? So I started getting paid in 2019. So it took me 3 years after moving to India with the intention of starting a company before I could pay myself. And that's definitely tough. A lot of people have done it a lot sooner than that. It's not like everyone needs to go through that, but for us, it took 3 years. And the things that helped in that are, one, some savings. Of course, I started out with savings, and then my wife got a job in India, so that helped cushion that. What is your North Star metric as a company? This is a good question. Honestly, we have debates around this today, very fervent debates. Today, we are looking at customer adoption and customer adoption in terms of how much, so a combination of different ways in which coaching is happening. We try to improve that. So that is a North Star metric. So how much coaching is happening. So in our case, it is when somebody looks at a call recording on Wingman, that's a thing. If somebody is looking at, if some coaching is happening through comments, people are coaching each other, that's something that's important. If the cue cards are actually, if people are actually using the cue cards, that's another metric. So we look at all of these things because they're different aspects of the product. All of them are trying to improve. But our North Star metric today is adoption, because that's the thing we need to improve the most. How is your relationship with risk and fear of failure? Me personally, I'm fairly comfortable with this. I'm fairly comfortable with this because of my experience with like.com. I realized that, if you fail at a startup, if you fail at, especially at, you try a startup and you fail, you still, nothing's lost. You've learned a lot, and you're in a better, you're often in a better place than you would have if you were doing something safe. I think because of that, I'm fairly comfortable with risk, fairly comfortable. The fear of failure doesn't drive me. It's not a big factor, thankfully. But everyone has to. Everyone who's in a startup has to somehow. I mean, there are always times when you do have fear of failure, when you feel like it's a roller coaster. There are often emotions. There are often points of fear, but it's not that it's limited to the success of the company, not limited to my success as a person, because I know this will only improve me as a person and my career, regardless of what happens. What are the current status of your funding expansion plans? So yeah, we raised a seed round, at the end of YC, so in September last year. So we are still a fairly small team, and we have significant runway. So we are, of course, not planning to raise anytime soon. We grow the in terms of growing the company, in terms of people, we are fairly deliberate about it. The thing is, we definitely don't feel like we have product market fit today yet, and we are very hesitant to basically grow the company to a point where it's difficult to make quick, big changes, which is often required until you find product market fit. So we do grow very deliberately and very slowly.
Yeah, Murali, I think we have just a minute more, so if you can just take one question, I think we'll be bang on time.
Okay, let's see. Can you describe frameworks or mental models you've used in the past to build a business? That's a tough one. There is not one framework. There are, I think, different aspects of building the business. There are different frameworks that you can use. I think, so most relevant to people here is probably the framework around how to build product, right? That's that's something a lot of people here are probably interested in, and that is also something. So there are different there are always different competing interests for what you can build in a product. And as an early team, as a small team, you really have to focus, and you really have to, you really have to have some, some theme, some, uh, like some way to structure all the different ideas that you have and to say this is what we work on, because otherwise the flame of product, because otherwise the number of things you can do is very vast, and you always have to come up with reasoning for, okay, what is the most urgent problem that for the company that we can solve through product, right? So say the most urgent problem in the company is customer adoption. Say there's a challenge in customers adopting a product, and then from there you drill down into what are the different ideas that we have. From the different ideas we have, what are the ideas that help solve that particular problem? That helps you narrow down the focus of the things that you could build into something that is urgent for the company. And from there, you go down into what is feasible, what is not feasible, how hard are the different things to build, what are the likelihoods of success. And from there, you can try to reason about what you should work on next. It's still difficult. It's easier said than done. And like I said, I do have some imposter syndrome here because I never feel like I have a really good answer for this, and I struggle with this every day. But that's the closest I have found to a framework. But there's still a fair bit of guesswork. There is a fair bit of intuition, and there is a fair bit of gut calls going into it, which I have no idea how to avoid as of yet.
Thank you so much for that, Murali.
Great.
Yeah, I think we've come to the end of the session as such. I'm sure the audience had a lot of takeaway from this. I think we've
actually. So if anybody has any questions, other questions that you would like me to answer, email me. My email is murali@wingman.com. I'll be happy to answer.
Can you just chat your email in the chat section?
I think that'd be great.
I'll do that.
Great.
Other than email, Murali, is there any other way to reach out to you apart from email?
I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is, I'll put my Twitter handle in the chat too. You can reach out to me on Twitter. You can email me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat whichever way.
Absolutely.
Great. So thank you very much, Murali. Thank you for your time. Just a quick note to the audience about the event that we're going to have tonight. Let me just share my. So we have a fundraiser event happening tonight at 9, and Rahul is joining us. And the funds raised in this event will go directly to Ahmedabad's COVID funds. And this event is pretty exciting because we're going to talk more about distribution and how, though we have so many players in this area, how Microsoft grew to 75 million people. And we're going to talk a lot about distribution. And it'll be great if you guys can participate in this event as well. So having said that, thank you very much, Murali. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you, Akash. Thank you, audience. You've been lovely. The questions were awesome. Thank you so much. Until next time.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you guys for inviting me, and thanks everyone for tolerating me.
All right. It was a wonderful session. Thank you so much, Murali. Thank you so much for everything. And if the audience, if you really want to know where we are hosting next sessions, feel free to subscribe to us. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, any of these social media channels as well. And you can remain updated about all of our events. We had an event yesterday as well with Rapido, Head of Products. We had one today with, of course, Murali. And we are having one in the night, just like Alan mentioned, right, with Rahul. So it's all a power pack session. Please feel free to follow us so as to keep getting updated. And yes, you can reach out to Murali anytime, either on mail or on Twitter or on LinkedIn, like he mentioned. And I'm sure he'll take up all the questions that you have. So thank you so much for everything, guys. Thank you so much, Murali, for joining the session. And stay safe, everybody. Have a fantastic day ahead. Yeah. Bye bye.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.